Welcome back everybody to another lesson in the Dead Earth game development series brought to you by the Game Institute. I'm Gary Simmons, this is lesson 14, and in this lesson we're going to catch our breath a little bit and take it a little bit easier because the last two lessons were pretty big and they were pretty intense. We had lots of stuff to learn and there was a lot of stuff to take on board and remember. So what I'm going to do in this lesson is show you how to import and clean up a library of thousands of animations that were originally part of the Carnegie Mellon University mocap archive. But someone has kindly converted them over, put them on the asset store. The library is so large, they're actually spread over 3 separate asset packages. So I'll show you how to get those in a minute and download them into Unity. They're completely free of charge, but like I said, this is raw animation data. So they need trimming, they need cleaning up, they need looping. And we need to do this because we don't have enough variety of animations at the moment from just Mixamo to create our AI state machine. And that's what we're going to be designing and beginning to work on in the next lesson. So while I'm going to show you how you can download these, and I'm going to give you some examples, I'm going to choose a couple of animations and show you how I cleaned them up and how I fixed the problems with them. I have also put in a zip file that accompanies this lesson, the bare minimum of animations that you're going to need that are already cleaned up that you can use to follow along with the next lesson when we build our AI state machine. And this lesson is just going to show you how I got those into that state. But there is enough that I'm going to give you in that zip file that you will be able to follow along with the other lessons. Now before I continue, let me just announce that I've created my own personal Gary Simmons channel on the Game Institute. And I'm going to be posting lots of interesting and juicy news and videos and all sorts of stuff, what I'm working on and things like that. So if you're interested in what I'm up to, then if you go to the Game Institute website, once you've logged in from your dashboard, go to the user channels. And if you can't see me in that list, go to the directory and either search for Gary or depending on how many you get on your screen, there I am there, Gary Simmons. And like I said, in that channel, if I find any interesting game dev videos, I'll be posting them there. I'll also be letting you know what I'm up to, what I'm currently working on, as well as just general chit-chat about my favorite subject, me. So if you fancy that, do subscribe to the Gary Simmons user channel. And I'll also be holding some chats on there from time to time. So I'll be making announcements if any of you want to come in, have a chat with me, or you've got any questions that you want to get instant responses to. Okay, so going back to Unity now, we need to go on the asset store and we need to download and import those packages. Now what I like to do in situations like this is rather than bring those bloated animation packages into my actual project, I prefer to create a temporary project where I can bring them in, sift through just the animations that I want, because remember, most of these animations we're not going to be using, so we just want to cherry pick the ones that we want, trim them, tidy them up, and then export that as a nice compact package from my temporary Unity project into our Dead Earth project. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to minimize this project, I'm going to create a new folder on my desktop. I'm just going to call this anim filter, and then I'm going to launch Unity and I'm going to choose to create a new project. And I don't want any asset packages, I want this to be a completely clean project. And actually I'm going to delete that anim filter folder from my desktop. I don't need to do that, do I? I can just call it anim filter here in the project name and it will create the folder for me. So there you go, nothing ticked, no asset packages included. I'm just going to click create project. As you can see, it's created the anim filter folder on my desktop, and here we are in a clean Unity project. So now I'm going to go to the window menu and I'm going to go to the asset store. I'm going to resize the window a little bit so I've got a bit more real estate to play with when viewing the asset store, and I want to open up the animations folder. Click on animations and you can see in the list, if we scroll down, there is this huge FBX mocap library. It says here, I don't know whether you can see that on the stream, 2,534 animations. Now that's a lot of animations, so they're going to be pretty big downloads and it'll take a while to import as well. Now you'll also see that this is produced by a company called Sea Monkeys. If I click on Sea Monkeys, it's going to take me to their own page on the asset store. And here we can clearly see that there are 3 separate packages, but they're all supposed to be viewed really as one package. So you want to download all of them and import all of them together. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to click on Huge FBX Mocap Library Part 1. Now you'll probably have a download button here. You'll have to wait for it to download. I've already downloaded it in preparation for this lesson, so that's now changed to display an import button. So I'm going to import that mocap library part 1. And this is going to take quite a while to decompress the package, so I'll pause the video while it's doing that. So here we go. We can see all of the animations that are in that first package. As you can see, they've all been very usefully named. When we look at the package in a minute, you'll notice that there's actually a spreadsheet and a text file in there that's going to tell us what all of these little subsections of animations contain. So you'll have one for like walking animations, dancing animations, and things like that. So I'm going to click to import this first package. This is going to take a while, so I'm going to pause the video again. And the first part of that package is in, pretty much. Be warned guys, this actually took ages. It took a lot longer than I thought. So if you look in the assets folder now, you can see we have a folder called Huge Mocap Library. And if we look in the mocap animations, we can see that we have a load of folders in there. And in each one of those folders, there's a handful of animation. And you can see at the moment, it goes down to folder 40. If I click on the mocap library, is it? No, the mocap animations folder. You can see at the bottom that there is a text file that you can open up. And it lists, I mean, look how many there are. It lists all of the various animations. Look at that. It goes on for ages. Now, I should also say that, like, not all of these animations are good, okay? Because it's just raw mocap data. So some of the takes by the actors, didn't go very well. They're not trimmed. Some of them are just a little bit broken. But a lot of them are very good. So, there's an awful lot there. At the moment, you can see if I go down to the bottom of the file, it goes up to folder 144, but we've only imported the first package, so it only goes up to 40. So what we need to do now is just close that folder up again, and we need to import the second part of that library. So if I scroll down to the bottom, you can see that as recommendations, the asset store has very handily recommended the next pack for me, Huge Mocap Library Part 2. Once again, you're probably going to see a download button here first. So you have to download it. Then once you've downloaded it, it will change to an import button. And then you can import it like I'm doing now. And that's going to add the second third of the animation collection into that Huge Mocap Library folder. So once again, I'm going to pause the video because it does take quite a while. And if you guys haven't downloaded it as well, you've also got the extra burden of waiting for it to download. But fortunately, it's a one-shot deal. You could actually keep this project around as well, so that whenever you need more animations, you can just come back and look over the ones that you haven't processed yet and trim them for your next project. And there you go. You can see actually that the first part of that package is grayed out because they already exist. But if I scroll down, you can see that it starts downloading from folder 41, or starts importing from folder 41, should I say. So I'm going to import that now. Once again, I'm going to pause it because it takes quite a long time. Okay, and that's the second one down. And finally, we'll go down to the third one. There it is. Once again, you'll probably have to download it. I've already downloaded it in preparation for this lesson, so I just have to hit the import button. And once again, I'm going to pause the video while it's importing and decompressing and stuff like that, because it takes a while. And once again, there's the list of the animations that are going to be imported as part of this package. So I click the import and wait again for them all to be brought into Unity. And the third and final one is in. We can now shut down the Asset Store tab because we don't need the Asset Store anymore. Okay then, so let's see what we have here. If you click on the Huge Mocap Library folder in the project view, then click on the Mocap Animations folder, you'll see that there are 144 subfolders in there. And each one of those folders contains FBX files which contain animations that are essentially in there because they share a similar theme. And we know from our previous lessons that if we want to preview and see what any of these animations look like, we can just open up a folder. For example, I'm going to open up folder 17, and I'll just click on the first FBX file contained in there. And notice the namings of these FBX files. This is called 1701 because it's the first animation in the 17 subfolder. And of course we know from previous lessons that when we select an FBX file in the project view, that's going to bring up the FBX importer in the inspector, and if it's not already set on the animations tab, then just make sure you click the animations tab, and then that's going to bring up all the information that allows us to view and edit the animation data contained therein. Now we can see straight away when we look at this character, although we haven't pressed play yet, it starts off in a T-pose, so we're definitely going to need to trim things like that out of these animations. Otherwise, if we wanted to use this animation, as soon as the zombie transitioned into it, it would go into a T-pose for a short while. Now this particular animation is an animation of a human walking around looking kind of confused and irritated. So if I press play, you'll see what I mean. Now one of the things you'll notice about most of these files is that their timelines are really long, and they contain the actor walking around performing a series of different maneuvers in that particular theme. So you can see in this particular case the guy is walking forward, he's walking backward, he's strafing left and right, all doing these kind of frustrated hand gestures. This is no good for us as an animation, because generally when we wish to assign an animation to a character, we don't want that animation to really change the direction that the character is walking in. If our zombie was walking towards the player and we wanted it to look frustrated, we would want to play a frustrated walk forward animation, not an animation that, lasts for 5 minutes of the guy going through all different frustrated directions. So what most of this cleanup process is going to be is not only trimming things like T-poses from the beginnings of these animations, but it's also going to be isolating just the sections within a given animation timeline that we wish to use, and then kind of carving that out, if you like, and making a separate animation clip asset from it. And we're going to see how to do that in just a moment. And I'm going to do probably 4 or 5 examples of this in this lesson to give you a good overview of the process. Now, of course, it's going to take you a long time to go through all of these folders and all of these animations and find the ones that you want and then apply the cleanup process to them. I've spent hours on this animation library already, and I've probably only really got through about half of them. But there is a document that is inside the mocap animations folder that we can use. It actually comes in various different forms. You've got a Microsoft spreadsheet format there. You've got a OpenOffice spreadsheet format there. You've got rich text format document there, and then you've got the just the straight text version of it. So I'm going to open that up in MonoDevelop, because that at least gets us pointing in the right direction. So if I scroll down to where the 17s begin, we can see how it describes that animation that we just played. There it is. 1701, walk with anger and frustration. Now there is one here called walk hobble. Now that might be quite useful for our zombies, because zombies are often injured and damaged. So let's have a look at 1705 and see what that gets us. So I'm going to click 17 as the folder, and then I'm going to play 05. Yeah, it's a pretty good hobble. Oh, but wait. Now it's hobbling backwards. Now it's hobbling to the right. So we're going to need to cut out just the portion of this animation that we want and then make an animation clip from it. Now if I open up the FBX in the project view, you can see it currently contains one animation clip. And this is what we've just played. It's called 1705. There it is in the clips list. And it is the complete animation. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new clip. And I'll call this, I don't know, Zombie Limp Walk. Now, because I've just added a new clip to the clips list, we can see now that if I press apply, you can see the 2 clips have now been defined. Now, my one is called Zombie Limp Walk, but at the moment it's identical to the 1705 animation clip. Because I haven't set the timeline markers for it, I'm going to need to isolate in this animation file just the section that I want and set those timeline markers accordingly. So I just kind of rip out that little part of the animation. But I need to set the timeline markers in such a way that what I'm left with is an animation that loops, if indeed I am after a looping animation, which of course you usually are when you're creating walking animations. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go down to the preview window, Going to make it a little bit bigger for the time being so we can see what we're doing. And I'm going to start scrubbing through the timeline by just left clicking on that little red cursor there with the left mouse button and beginning to drag. And as I do so, you can see at the bottom of the preview window, we see the frame number. And that's pretty important because what we're looking for at the moment is where we wish to move our start marker to on the timeline, which frame that's going to be. So once we isolate that, we'll know what to set that value to. So as I start scrubbing, we obviously don't want this beginning bit because it's got the T-pose in it, and we probably don't want the very first couple of steps either because the actor's kind of getting into his stride at that point. You can see that the legs are quite bendy. So around about probably frame, I don't know, 50, 59 looked like a pretty good place where the feet are almost together. Yeah, 59. So there's two ways that you can set the starting pose marker. You can either just drag the marker out to that red line, like so. What did I say it was? Number 50, wasn't it? 59. Or, because that can be a bit fiddly on a long animation, you can just type it in, like so. So I've typed in frame number 59. Okay, so now what we need to do is we need to do exactly the same for the end marker. And we only want to sort of have a little bit where the guy is walking forward. We don't want to get all that animation data in there where he starts changing direction and walking backwards. So it's going to be a very small subset of this animation that we want. Now it's not as simple as just setting this to whatever we want. Otherwise we're going to have an animation that just doesn't loop at all. You can see there's a nasty glitch at the end. In fact, when we get out of the animation at the end marker point, our pose and our position and even our rotation is just nothing like what it's in at the start marker point. And what we need to do is we need to find a place in the animation, if we're making a looping animation, where we match this up as best as possible. The ideal situation, of course, is that when we get to the end marker, the pose of the character and the rotation of the character is identical to that at the starting marker. But of course, this is humanoid recording, so we're never going to really get it that exact. So we have to do the best that we can do, and then once we've got what we think is essentially right, fix up any sort of glitches in the animation by using the loop time and loop pose properties. So one of the things that you'll notice is that when I start dragging the end marker, you get these peculiar little line graphs come up. And they're there to show us how good a particular aspect is of the animation at being looped to the starting point marker. So where the graph is green highlights for that particular property where it would most suitably loop. So you can see the first property is the loop pose. Okay, and you can see where it's yellow, we know it's not going to loop because the character is not even sort of walking in the same direction or, performing the same walking animation. But you can see there is this little green peak here around about frame 90, where for the pose at least, it looks like it's a pretty good fit according to this graph. Now underneath that, you also have properties and graphs for what the rotation of the character is at the start and end points, what the position along the y-axis, in other words the altitude of the character is at the start and end points, and what the root position is on the x and z plane. Now we're not looking to loop that at all because this is a walking animation with root motion, which means that if we wanted to loop the xz position, it means the character wouldn't actually be moving at all. We absolutely want our xz position to be different, and we don't really care too much in this particular instance of a walking animation about the y position either. And you'll notice that as I make a match for a particular property, we have this little green light on the right hand side, and you can see that at a marker endpoint of 91, it's actually telling us that we have 3 green lights. We're matching the loop pose, we're looping the rotation of the character, and we're also looping the altitude of the character along the y-axis. But you can see the root position along the xz plane is a completely flat line. It's red, there's going to be no looping there, and that's cool. So of course if I were to move it somewhere else, you would see that those lights are no longer all green. But like I said, 91 I think was the sweet spot that we found. Yes. So you would imagine then, because we have 3 green lights, that we would get a pretty good looping animation at this point. And it's not bad, but it still glitches. Can you see that glitch? That's because, the head is in a slightly different position. One of the thighs is in a slightly different position, so it has to do a little bit of a kind of a glitch to loop back round. Now, we also saw in a previous lesson that when we have animations that don't loop flawlessly, we can use the loop time property, which basically tells Mechanim that we want this animation to loop. Now, that's not going to make any difference to the animation in itself. That's just going to control how the Mechanim state machine loops the animation back round to the beginning when we're done. But we also have this loop pose. And like I said, I think it was in the last lesson, if we have a situation where the pose at the end marker doesn't identically match the pose at the start marker, what the loop pose does is it kind of blends the two together to create almost like a halfway pose between the two, and then puts that at the start and end point. So as long as they're close enough, we're going to get something that doesn't deform our animation too badly and also loops perfectly. So you can see if I press loop pose now, open it up a minute, we should now have a perfectly looping animation of our guy limping. Look at that. How sweet is that? One of the issues that we have with animations like this is because it's been human recorded and the character wasn't walking in a perfectly straight line. If we press play, we can see that our character is essentially veering to the left when he walks. And over some time that could really, see him walking in a completely different direction. Now, it doesn't really make that much difference in Dead Earth because we're going to have this character controlled by an AI state machine. And the AI state machine is going to, much like we showed in the last lesson, continually be adjusting the rotation of the character so that it's facing towards the target. So even if it does veer a little bit to the left within one animation cycle, the character is going to realize that it's gone to the left a little bit and rotate itself round to the right. I'm also going to put a system in our AI state machine that's going to allow us to counteract more severe versions of this. For example, there's an animation clip we'll look at in a moment of a gorilla that's kind of bouncing on the ground. The animation really carries the character in a very sideways motion, even though we really want it to run forward. So what I do in those particular situations is I allow for any given state that our zombie may be in to say, I want you to treat the look vector that you're going to be heading towards as if it's offset so many degrees to the left and right. In the case of that gorilla animation, when we actually face the character at the target and it starts to run, we know that when it's actually facing the target, the animation actually carries it off maybe 20 degrees to the right. So what I can say in that particular case is I can say, I want you to readjust your target position so that you aim 20 degrees to the left of where the character actually is. And that way, we make sure that the character runs towards the target, taking in any lateral movement in its animation. Now, the other thing that you can do with an animation, we're not going to do that here, is if your animation has root motion, either on the y-axis or on the x-axis, which we can throw it away. So the classic example in a animation like this is if I decided to throw away the root transform position xz and instead just bake that into the pose itself, what we'll see is a character just kind of walking on the spot, right? It's not really doing anything. Now I can show you also what root position y looks like, but you wouldn't see any difference with this particular model because the model isn't jumping up in the air. Now, sometimes this is pretty useful. Like, I can't imagine many situations where if you were using root motion, you would really want to turn off root transform position XZ and bake that into the pose. But there are some pretty good reasons why you might want to bake the Y rotation into the pose. Like, for example, imagine you had a animation of an athlete that had to jump over hurdles in a 110 meter Olympic hurdles race. Now, one way that you could do this is obviously if there was root motion in the animation is you could have the character actually sort of jump up in the air, which would launch the game object itself up into the air and over the hurdle if root motion was enabled. But sometimes what you might want to do is say, I actually don't want the game object to actually go up in the air. I still want to keep its base in sort of bedded onto the racetrack. And what I'll do is instead I'll bake the vertical motion into the actual animation itself. So the character would still jump up into the air. You would still see the physical mesh move up in the air. But in the world, the character's game object would still be placed on the surface of the ground. It's just that the mesh is now more offset from that ground position. Sometimes that could be useful. If we need it, I will show it. And of course, the other thing is root rotation. I mean, this character hasn't really got any rotation. It's walking in a straight line. If we took one of our animations, such as our turning on the spot animations, and got rid of root rotation, then baked it into the pose, but then our actual game object, when it was attached to it, wouldn't actually rotate, even though the model itself would. So you'd see like the model would rotate, but the game object would still be kind of facing in the original direction. So I don't know, you don't usually want to use that either. So I'm going to press apply now, and we now have our zombie limp walk. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to rename that. I'm going to call it zombie limp walk. And then what I'm going to do, because remember, I'm thinking about putting the animations that I want into a separate package that I can import into our Dead Earth project. So in my assets folder, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new folder, and I'm going to call that Dead Earth. And what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to marry up the same sort of folder structure that we have in our project. So you remember, in our Dead Earth project, we have the Dead Earth folder, and then we have a subfolder called Animations. And then in our animations folder, we had a series of company names. So because these are animations that have been cleaned up by me of Game Institute, I will create a folder in there called, I don't know, Game Institute, I guess. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take that animation that I was just working on, which is in folder 17, I believe. And then I'm going to drag it into that. Oop, I dragged it into the wrong folder. I need to drag it into the Game Institute folder. And once I've done this with all of my animations, what I'm then going to do is I'm going to export my Dead Earth folder, which will contain the animation subfolder, the Game Institute subfolder, and then just the animations that I want to use in Dead Earth. And because I've exported the Dead Earth folder, the folder structure is maintained in the package, so that when I import them into my Dead Earth project, it's going to correctly recognize that we already have a Dead Earth folder, we already have an animations folder. It's going to create a Game Institute folder in our animations folder, and just put in the new animations. And all of the animations that we currently have stored in our animations and Dead Earth folders, they're all going to be fine. They're not going to be overwritten or anything. So it just allows us to bring those animations right into our other project exactly where we want them. Okay, just also bear in mind that the zombie limp walk animation clip is the clip that we would want to drag into the animation state machine, okay, not the 1705. I could delete that clip. I don't want to, because it contains all of the source timeline, so it might be useful in the future just for sort of previewing the entire timeline of the animation. But that's the only one that we're going to be using. So let's go and have a look at another one. I've made some notes here, guys, because obviously there are so many folders and stuff. So I just picked out a few sort of good ones that I thought would make good candidates. So I found one, I've made a note of myself here, it's called Alerted Idle, and it's in folder 140. And what animation is it? Number 7. So let's have a look at this. You can see it's pretty glitchy at the moment. So we're going to need to do exactly the same as we did last time. Like I said, I could just, you know, sort of change the name of the animation clip that's there already, but I'll add another one. And I'll make my changes to this. So I'm going to call this Alerted Idle. So this is when the zombie is in an idle state, but he's heard something. He's like, I don't like the sound of that. And I want to get as much variation as possible. So I don't want to cut out too much of the animation if I don't need to. Need to get rid of the T-pose. Need to just go forward enough such that the actor is in his flow. 29, something like that. So I'm going to set the start marker to 29. And then I'm going to pull in the end part marker, really, and just see if there's... As you can see, it's going to be pretty easy to loop this one, because the character's not moving or walking. So, what do I want? I probably don't want one that long. I'll just bring it down to a similar length, something like 90 odd. 93. 3 green lights. Yeah, should be okay. So now I'm going to click loop time, because I want this to be a looping animation, and then I'm going to click loop pose so that we fix up the seam where the end and start markers wrap around. Looks pretty good to me. Okay, so there we go. We have a new zombie idle animation. So I'm going to press apply to apply those changes. And then I'm going to rename that actual animation in the project view, and I'm going to call this Alerted Idle. And then I'm going to drag that into my animations.gameinstitute folder, like so. And let's have a look at another one. There's one here called Turn on Spot. And that's in folder 120. That's what I called it, Turn on Spot. And I made a note for myself that it was actually 19. So let's have a look at this bad boy. It doesn't look like a turn on spot, does it? But I expect if I let this play out, there's going to be a turn on spot animation in the middle of it somewhere. There you go. Yeah, it's like a 180-degree turn. And we can just pan through it very quickly and find all manner of things that it's doing. So you can see there's another example where we've got a really long timeline. And we could, if we wanted to, make 2 clips out of this. We could take out that walking clip as well. I didn't think it looked particularly zombie-esque. But if you do, you can carve that out and make multiple clips here. But I'm just going to carve out the turn on spot. So I am going to press the plus button. And I'm going to rename that animation turn on spot left. Was it left? Oh, I'll rename it in a minute if it turns out to be right. I can't remember. And let me find which is the best turn. I'll just go for the first turn, I guess. This one here. So I want to get to the point just before he starts to turn. He's already turning there. Probably about 320 as the start marker. Yeah, 320. So I'm going to move in the end marker and try and find where there's some nice greenage that is as close to the end of the turn as possible. Yeah, I reckon about there. Yeah, about 386, something like that. Okay, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to press play and just see if it happens to loop flawlessly anyway, which it doesn't, but sometimes they do. Sometimes you're lucky. So I'm going to loop this, and I'm going to do loop pose. Now I should just say that this might not be an animation that you particularly want to loop. For example, a turn on spot animation might be set up in your state machine such that when you turn and the animation is over, you transition into another state. But in our animation state machine, we're going to have like a turn on spot variable that as long as it's set to either -1 or 1, the character is going to keep turning, playing that animation left or right respectively. So I'm going to click loop time, then I'm going to click loop pose. And this is actually a turn right animation, isn't it? So I name this turn right. And you can see in this particular case, if I disabled root rotation and instead baked the rotation into the pose, we've got kind of like a turn on spot animation. But it's hard to tell from this view, but the actual game object that it's attached to wouldn't be rotating with it, I believe. I've never used that, to be honest. Okay, I'm going to click apply now. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to duplicate that animation. What was it? The start point was 320, end point was 386. I'm going to call 320. See, I've created a new animation clip there. 386, and I'm going to call this one turn on spot left. Then I'm going to loop it, loop the pose, and then I'm going to click mirror and then click apply. And now this should turn left. And then we have the turn right as well. And I'll just let the turn left one run so we check we definitely have seamless. Yeah, pretty good stuff. So I'm now going to select this FBX file in the project view. I'm going to rename it turn on spot or something like that. And if I open this up now in the project view, you'll notice that it now has those 2 new animation clip assets that I've created for it. So I'm going to drag that into my Game Institute folder, like so. I've also got another one here called Zombie Injured, which is in folder 91. Let's have a look at that. That sounds cool, and I can't remember what it looks like either. And that's in folder 91, and it's animation file 25. So let's have a look at this bad boy. Oh yeah, you can see there, walking with a limp. I should just mention actually that although I've not had to do this, and you won't have to either, but when you're doing this with other animation libraries, you may find that you have to set the rig to humanoid and generate an avatar for it, like we described in the last lesson. We haven't had to do that here because these animations were already set up on the asset store in that package, already retargeted towards a humanoid rig, so thank heavens for that. Okay, so let's repeat this same process. So I need to start scrubbing through the timeline. Oh no, I need to create a new animation clip first. So I'm going to click the plus sign and I'm going to call this Zombie injured walk left, because this is him sort of limping. Is he limping with the left leg or the right leg? Get it wrong every time. He's actually limping with the right leg, leading with the left. So I'll call this zombie injured walk right, and then I'm going to just kind of scrub through the timeline, see if I can find the place where I want to punch in and out of. Probably somewhere around there. Yeah, that's where the sort of feet are fairly together. It's trial and error really, man, guys. And I need to then bring the end marker in. That's not looking promising. Can't really see a green line on that at all, can you? Wonder if I can change the start pose. Let me forget about the end pose for now and just try and find a better start pose where the feet are maybe together like that. The thing is, I have got a green mark there, and it does loop round. The thing is, it's not very much animation, is it? I want to have a little bit more variation in it. Yeah, okay, I'm going to go for the green mark, I think. No, I'm not. I'm going to go for the next highest peak, I think, and I'm going to see if the loop pose will fix any jutters that I have in it. It's not a very good match at the moment. You'll see what I mean. If I press play, we're going to see a bit of a jitter there. And I'm going to see if the loop pose fixes that up good enough to use. I think it does. It's a little bit jittery, isn't it? No, I think I'm going to go with that. I'll just see what it's like with the perfect green light, which was this one back here. Actually, that is better. I should have believed the light system. I just thought it might be a repetitive, sort of animation if it just did the one limp forward and the drag forward of the leg and just repeated that over and over again. But it looks fine. Okay, so as you can see, the punch-in point was 98 in this particular instance. The punch-out point was 134, so I'll save that off by clicking apply, and then I will go back up and I will create a brand new animation remembering those punch-in and punch-out points. 98, 134, 98, 134, and I'll call this zombie injured walk left. And then I'll go down to the bottom of the inspector and I will click mirror like so. And now we'll have a zombie that's limping with the other leg. Doesn't look good. Oh, there you go. With that new animation I created, I forgot to click loop time and loop pose. So then I click apply. And we're in business. So I'm going to rename this FBX file in the project view. And I'm going to call this zombie injured walk or something like that. These aren't the actual names I gave them. I can't remember what they were. Doesn't matter. It's just for demonstration purposes. And then I'm going to drag that into the Game Institute folder. And I think I'm going to just do one more before I wrap up this particular part of the lesson. And I want to show something that was nothing to do with the humanoid animation at all, really. I mean, it was targeted at a humanoid animation, but I saw it in the text file and I thought that would be cool. And that was the gorilla walk. Let me see, I just found that there was this thing in here in folder 12002 called gorilla, and I was kind of thinking that might be quite good. We might have these like little child zombies that are crawling through the sewers, and a little bit like, if any of you have ever watched The Strain, the TV series The Strain, they had these little kid vampires that kind of were pretty spooky just because they kind of crawled along like monkeys on the floor. So let's go down to 120. Select that folder, and it was 120 animation 2. So let's see what this looks like. There you go. Wow, it's doing lots of gorilla movements in there. Now I'll just show the movement for now, but there might actually be some more stuff that we can take out of that, like that one there where they beat the chest. So let's once again go up to the FBX import inspector, make sure we have the animations tab selected, and then click on the plus symbol at the bottom of the clips list to create a new clip, and I'll rename that. I'm actually going to call this gorilla walk so I know what it is, And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to try and find the bit in the animation that I want to cut out. I did make some notes here, so it's going to be a little bit quicker. I need to make sure that it's down on the floor about there. Yeah, 58. And then what we need to do is try and find... You can see we've got nothing here pose-wise that's even remotely close to a green line. So I think we're just going to have to do our best here. And try and get a pose that looks pretty good. So right down there. Yeah, something like about that, I think. Maybe that one. Yeah, maybe about 78. Just check like there's not a better loop for that. No, that's about as good as I can get. So obviously if we press play on that now, actually it's not too bad. You can see a bit of a jitter, but we haven't looped the pose yet. So I think that should fix that up quite nicely. So I click loop pose, loop time, click apply, and we should have a nice bouncing zombie. Now, one of the things I wanted to draw your attention to, remember earlier on I was saying about how you might have a situation where the direction in which the object is facing is not necessarily the way that the animation carries the character, and this is a classic example of that. As you can see, the red arrow is essentially the direction in which the object is facing, but you can see that the character actually sort of animates almost perpendicular to that. It's almost moving at right angles to it. So when I put this animation in my AI state machine initially, I had a situation where I would make sure that the character was facing the player, and then when it started to run towards it, it would just go to the left of the player, because imagine the player's in front of the character here, and then you say walk forward, and it ends up walking off to the left. So what I do in this particular situation, like I said, is I have this ability for any given animation clip to specify that we wish to offset the look vector. So in this particular situation, I would say if I am in, imagine the camera here in the preview window is actually the target that he's heading towards. It would basically say if this is where you're heading towards, then what you actually need to do is kind of be facing that way so that you run, or that way so that you run towards me sideways. And that works out quite well. So I don't think I need to do a mirrored version of that. So I've clicked apply. I'm going to rename that Gorilla, and then I'm going to finally drag that into my Game Institute folder, like so. So that's basically what you would do, and you would end up, you know, over time creating all of your animations, which you could then sort into separate subgroups. So you could have, like, you know, idle animations, walking animations, taking damage animations, etc. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to click on my Dead Earth folder, and I'm reenacting what you would go through if you wanted to now bring the animations out of here and bring into our Dead Earth folder. And like I said, these folders that I've created, Dead Earth Animations Game Institute, are going to be respected and maintained when we import it into our other project. So I would then just go right click on the Dead Earth folder, and I would choose Export Package. Shows me the animations and the folder layout that's going to be exported in the package. I can click include dependencies or not, doesn't really matter, these don't have any dependencies. I click export, and I'll put it on my desktop for this demonstration, and I'll just call it my lesson 14 package, like so. That's going to export out. If you go back to my desktop, there it is, my lesson package. So I'm going to kind of pretend now that this project I'm currently in doesn't exist. I'm going to delete everything that's in it and just assume that this is a brand new project. Okay. I'm not going to delete the mocap library. It doesn't matter. That's just ignore that. Okay. And what I'm going to do is pretend this is our Dead Earth project, and I want to now import those animations we just exported. Remember, I've deleted them all from this project now. I would just double click. It would say, hey, there's some animations here, and I want to put them in the Dead Earth Animations Game Institute folder. Is that okay? And I would say yes, that is absolutely okay with me. Please bring them in. And then after they've imported, you'll see that it's there they are. You've now got those in another project to play with, and you know, you've got the individual animation clips that you can then drag into an animation state machine. So before I close down this project, I just want to demonstrate one last example of how we may export and exchange animation clips between Unity projects. Now, we've seen in previous lessons that when we import an FBX file that contains animation data, we select it, and in the FBX Import Inspector on the Animations tab, we have a series of settings, including the markers to set the in and out sections on the timeline, that are used to create independent animation clip assets in Unity. So if I drop down the Gorilla asset inside the project view, you can see that two Unity animation assets have been created, one called 120_02 and the other one that we just created called Gorilla Walk. Now, ordinarily, what you would want to do is you would want to export the FBX file, so that if you import that into another project and then you change your mind about how those animation clips should be set up, you can go back to the FBX importer, you can select the animation clip, you can adjust the in-out markers, the loop pose settings, and all the various other things. However, sometimes you may find that you're given animation assets purely as animation clips. Now, to demonstrate this, let me select the Gorilla Walk animation clip that we've created, go up to the Edit menu and choose Duplicate. This has now created an animation clip called Gorilla Walk, which is no longer part of any FBX file. Essentially, we just made an asset which is just the animation clip itself, that contains all of the import settings that we set up for that Gorilla Walk animation. That means we know it's been retargeted towards a humanoid rig, we know that the in-out markers on the timeline have been set, and we've set things like the loop time and things like that. However, if I select the Gorilla Walk animation, you can see that I don't get the standard FBX import settings, because this isn't an FBX file anymore. It's already a baked animation clip. Now, it works in exactly the same way. You can see if I press play, I can still play it and I can still assign it to my state machine, but I've got very limited options with respect to how I can change the settings. For example, when I select it, I can no longer change the in and out markers on the timeline. And although we haven't covered it yet, you'll see there's lots of other things missing, such as being able to define custom events and curves. Animation curves is going to be a big part of what we discuss when we're building our animation state machine. Essentially, the animation, apart from being able to change the loop time, the loop pose, and mirror it and things like that, is pretty much locked down as it is. Now, this means that, say for example, you imported this animation clip into your Unity project, and then you decided that you wanted to go back and change it so that it was no longer a humanoid rig, but it was a generic rig, you wouldn't be able to. You don't have the option anymore. It's already been compiled into this asset. We also wouldn't be able to add curves and things like that to the animation clip. Now, some of the animations that I've given you in the zip file that accompanies this lesson are in this format, purely because for legal reasons of distribution I was unable to give you the full FBX file. But don't worry, the ones I've given you that have already been kind of pre-baked down into animation clip assets don't require anything more than I've put on them. So I've only used it for animations where we don't need to add curves and things like that. So just bear in mind that when you import the package that accompanies this lesson, many of them will be FBX files that you have full control over, and you can change the import settings. Some of them, because I couldn't give you the FBX files, will already be sort of pre-canned animation clips that are essentially set in stone as they are. So flicking back to the Dead Earth project now, I want to bring in the Unity package that I've given you that accompanies this lesson. So if you haven't downloaded the zip file for lesson 14 from the website, make sure that you do that. I've got it on my desktop here. It's called Game Institute Mocap Cleaned.unity package. Now, just to draw your attention to what's going to happen, you can see that in our Dead Earth folder we have the animations folder, and that has the Mixamo animations, the motion capture online animations, and the Unity Technologies animations. When I import this package, it's going to create a Game Institute folder in there with all of these animations that I've cleaned up and provided you with. As you can see, there's quite a few of them. And that's going to be enough, I think, to create the animation state machine that Dead Earth uses. Now, obviously, in the actual Dead Earth game, I have many more varieties of animations, but I've had to spend quite a bit of money, or more precisely, I've had to spend quite a bit of Game Institute's money, which I had no problem doing, on getting a really nice set of animations. But there's enough here for me to demonstrate and for you to follow along with the course. So I'm going to press the import button. I'm going to import all of these animations. Might take a while. Okay, and they're in. Now, if you look in our Dead Earth Animations folder now, you can see we now have a Game Institute folder that also has several subfolders. So we have an attack folder, which contains lots of attack animations. Let me open up the preview window a bit bigger so you can see what some of these look like. Let's have a look at this one. That's like a combo. Whoa. Pretty cool. Slap down. And when we build our animation state machine, we'll kind of have these animation clips randomly selected so that the zombie doesn't always use the same attack animation on you, because that kind of looks a bit silly and a bit robotic when you do that. And there's the final. So I think having 6 attack animations is going to be enough. I'm going to flip past the cinematic animations for the moment, and I'm going to show you some of the damage. Damage are basically animation clips that either describe what a portion of the body is going to look like when it's damaged. So what you're seeing here is what the zombie is going to look like when its upper left body is damaged. Now, it's not just going to stand there. What we're going to use is an avatar mask to mask off the bottom bit of this animation. So this top half of this animation is all that's going to be applied to the animation. So we'll have a zombie that's running or walking or doing whatever it's doing, but it's going to kind of hunch over with its damaged arm kind of hanging down like so. I've got a right version of that. This is just a single framed animation of a zombie in the dead pose. So if you want to put any kind of dead zombies in your level, or dead humans, you can just assign a very simple animation controller that just has this animation state. And that's going to take care of, when the level starts, positioning the bones in this position. So we can have dead bodies. This one here is what happens when the zombie takes a hit to the left of the head. There you go. These don't actually need to loop. Pretty cool, isn't it? Now here's some animations which, as you can see, have not come in FBX format, but are pre-canned animations. Got this one, which is a hit to the chest. Ooh. Hit to the front of the face. Hit to the left of the face. Hit to the right of the face. And a knockback. Ooh. Kind of more like a stomach hit, that, isn't it? See that again? And then we have some more injured sort of walking animations. I think that's the one I showed you actually a few moments ago. I have right versions of that. I also have different injured walks. Here's another one which isn't so much a limp, more like the zombies dealing with a rather nasty hernia. And there's left and right versions of that. And then there's this one here where the zombie's kind of a bit deformed and is kind of walking, either leaning to the left or leaning to the right. Then we have several idle animations. Let's have a look at some of these. That one where the zombie's just kind of looking around. Another one here. This one is the zombie being a little more alert. Doesn't look too scary with the default Unity avatar, does it? It's another one that's kind of in the sort of getting ready to sort of go into a sort of an aggressive run pose. Quite a few here. This one's quite a good one. We just tilts the head from left to right. It just means that when we have several zombies in the level, they're not all just idling or patrolling using the same animations. This is quite a good one. An unstable zombie, I called this. Zombie idle unstable. It's a bit like me. After 2 pints. The only guy I know that can be completely intoxicated and still legally completely under the limit. There you go. And then we have loads of like walking and running animations. There's loads of them here. I'll let you sort of go through those. There's, of course, is our gorilla. It's also a sneak. Look at that one. A sprint. Pretty scary if that's walking at you. I've got this one where the zombie is kind of having spasms, which is quite good. I've called that the spasmodic zombie walk. Loads of different walks. And we've got some turns as well. So we've got some just turning on the spot. I think that's one of the ones that we trimmed at the beginning of this lesson. I've got one where the zombie just twists on the heel in sort of 90-degree increments. There's what I've called a human-like turn on the spot. Not sure I actually used that one. This one's pretty cool. I've called this Romero turn on the spot left and right because it reminds me of how the zombies move in the George Romero movies, things like the original Day of the Dead. Sort of labours itself around. And if you've seen the Dead Earth promo, you've no doubt seen that animation being used. Here's a stiff turn on the spot. And a zombie limp. This one's quite nice as well. I like this one. Almost where the zombie has to kind of use sort of its torso to almost swing itself around. And finally we have the cinematic. Now there's quite a few cinematics, and you're not really going to see how these are used until we start designing the cinematic layer of our animation state machine. So we have one where the zombie has been shot dead onto its front and it starts to climb up, and that's where it climbs sort of from a lead down position up into a crawling position, and then of course he will actually start crawling. But the crawling animation is actually in the locomotion folder. I've got another one here where he's laying on the side. This could be good for a cinematic where when you walk into a room you think the zombie's dead because it's laid on its side, and then it slowly starts to get up, and then it would transition into either an idle or a pursuit animation. This one's quite an important one. This is going to be the animation that we use when the zombie's been sort of knocked down and it's ragdolled, and we are going to design a system that's going to allow us to blend the ragdoll into the starting frame of this animation. So as this animation starts to play, we'll slowly blend the character from its ragdoll position into the position described by the bones in the animation. That's going to allow us to reanimate a zombie that's been ragdolled, which is pretty cool. We have some feeding animations. We have a feeding animation to a get-up animation. Another eating animation. An eating crouched animation. And I've already carved these up for you. These were actually taken from Mixamo's feeding animation, which originally had the zombie sort of going from an idle into a feeding, then a feeding loop, and then back out of the feed loop into the idle loop. So I've carved off just a bit where he stood up and he goes into a feeding loop like so. And then when we get down at the end of this animation, we're going to transition into the eating animation that we got from Mixamo. Things like that aren't looped. We don't want them to loop. When they reach the end of their animation, we actually want them to transition based on their exit time into another animation, such as the loop that has him eating on the floor. And we've also got the same one in reverse. So when this thing is on the floor eating and you do something like walk past it, or you shine your torch on his back, he's going to go, "Hey, what was that?" And then he'll start chasing you. We also have some twitching animations. So if a zombie's been kind of put totally out of commission because he's damaged, but it's not quite totally dead yet, it's going to lie there twitching on its back. And there's also a twitching on the front as well. And finally, we also have two animations where you could have the zombie trapped under a bus or something, and just the top half of him is coming out and he's going, "Hey, help, let me out." And one on the front as well. Okay, so that's all of the animations that I think we're going to need in conjunction with what else we've downloaded, such as the Unity Technologies animations and of course our Mixamo animations. So I'm going to leave it there for this lesson. I know it's been a pretty light lesson, but we have learned how to bring in pretty much animation data in any rough format and how to clean it up, how to bring it into another project so that we can use it. And of course we learned a few lessons ago how even if that animation is not a humanoid animation but is meant for a bipedal character, that we can also, set that animation to be retargeted towards a humanoid rig. Then we can clean up all the bits, just take the section out of the timeline that we want, and then save that off and import it. So thanks for listening, guys. In the next lesson we're going to actually start designing our AI state machine. Now that isn't the animation state machine, which is going to work alongside our AI state machine. The AI state machine is going to be the brain of our zombie. It's going to be what makes it decide when it's time to patrol, when it's time to feed, how fast it should be going, whether root motion should be getting applied, and so on. So thanks for listening. I'll see you in the next video. This has been Gary Simmons for the Game Institute. Bye bye now.